Good day and welcome back to The Shed. Today we go back to 2018 to take a look at Mary Robinette Kowal's Hugo, Nebula and Locus award-winning novel for that year, The Calculating Stars. So what I would like to do, as always, is provide a spoiler-free plot overview. I'll talk to what I liked and what I didn't like in this one. We'll make some recommendations based on similar novels that we've read to date, and I'll rank it on our ever-growing SCI-FI Shed ladder. And this one's going to be an interesting one to see exactly where it lands. So what we learned in this alternate history novel is that on the 3rd of March 1952, a huge meteorite strikes Washington DC, destroying much of the US East Coast. And what we learned is that on the fringes of this explosion is this Elmer and Nathaniel York. They're a husband and wife team who've just sort of seen this happen in the background, and they're expecting that maybe this was some kind of atomic bomb or some kind of explosion. And that's to put two and two together and realize that it's been a meteorite. And Elmer does this amazing math in her head to calculate when the blast wave would hit them, just to showcase just how strong of a mathematician Elmer was. And her husband happens to be a rocket scientist as well. So they're very intelligent individuals, and they soon put two and two together as they brace for this huge blast wave to hit them. What we also learn is that Elmer is a World War II fighter pilot. She was part of the WASP, the Women Air Force Service Personnel, so she was carrying a whole lot of warplanes back in the war. So she's a gifted pilot, and she also happens to have her personal plane in a nearby airport, and that takes sort of refuge in that, trying to avoid all this falling debris from the sky. And what we learn is that Elmer has a brother who's this weather scientist, and she finally touches base with him, and they soon discover that with the help of Elmer's mathematical genius and her brother's weather knowledge, they put two and two together and realize that this impact is actually got the potential to be a doomsday device. So they're fearing for the worst, and they feel that the Earth is not going to recover from this, and the weather is going to change to a point that will make life on Earth impossible. So Nathaniel and Elmer put this case to the president, who believes them and starts this space program to colonize the planets. So we learn that the space colony program has started, and Elmer applies to be an astronaut, only to be knocked back because of sexual and racism still being pretty prevalent back in 1952. So what is there to like in Mary Robinette Kowal's The Calculating Stars? For me, it would have to be the premise on this one. I really enjoyed the premise of this doomsday planet buster meteorite that's impacted the East Coast, that's going to cause severe weather patterns which will be not suitable for human life on the planet. So I really liked that concept, and I thought the science was reasonably done. And this is not a hard science fiction novel, by the way, but I think it is well researched to make it believable. I also like that space race, right, that is actually being propelled by something significant. So there's a real pressing urgency for us to get into space and colonizing the planet. And I like that what if. What if that had have happened just after the war, where we had these women pilots who are skilled, having to, fight sexism and racism within this astronaut body, with the urgency of us getting into space. So I really did like the premise in this one. The other thing I really enjoyed was the call out to the WASP, the Women Air Force Service Personnel. I thought it was a really wonderful tribute to these wonderful women who did some really amazing and very brave things during World War II. And some of the challenges that they experienced after the war, wanting to join programs like the Air Force and astronauts back in NASA. So it was really, really interesting. I really appreciated that look and insight into what it might have been like in 1952 with this alternate spin to it as well. The other thing I would have to call out is the characters. I did enjoy the characters in Elmer and Nathaniel. They were sort of the main protagonists in this, but I like the supporting cast as well. I thought the characters were enjoyable. I'll come back to the characters again though when I talk to some of my dislikes, because they weren't necessarily perfect, but they were generally a highlight for me in this novel. So what is there not to like in Mary Robinette Kowal's The Calculating Stars? And for me, the primary criticism I would have to say is that I feel she just tried to pack too many themes into the one novel. I mean, we have a whole lot of stuff going on here. We've got this doomsday event in this meteorite crash. We have, women fighting against adversaries when it comes to sexism and racism. We have the whole space race going on. We have internal conflict and internal demons that are challenging Elma, the main protagonist in this. And I felt there was just too much going on. And to illustrate why I thought that was a negative for me is that with the doomsday event, I mean, this was a huge meteorite strike that's going to cause life on Earth as we know it to become extinct. But we don't really see what the rest of the world is doing. We get a very narrow view of what's happening and how America responds to this catastrophic event. But we don't really see what's happening with the USSR, for example, what's happening in Europe or, Australia, dare I say. And you just don't learn about anything else in the world. And I thought that impact would have had a lot more catastrophe attached to it that would have been felt worldwide. So I just felt that was a little bit lacking, and I just used that as a demonstration of what I thought just packing all those themes into this novel resulted in. So when it comes to the characters in the novel, I mentioned that generally I like the characters in the novel, but that's not to say that I enjoyed the relationship between the characters. I mean, some of the pillow talk that happens between Elma and her husband Nathaniel was seriously gag-worthy. I mean, if it happened once or twice, I would have just rolled my eyes. But by the end of this, I was literally gagging. It was just like, bleh. It was just all too perfect, and Nathaniel was just all too perfect. Not once did he show any sign of irritation, anything other than just a perfect human being. And I just don't know. I just found it just to be unrealistic, and I just didn't really enjoy their relationship. I mean, I thought it was fine at times, but just generally overall, I just thought it was just overdone and I didn't quite enjoy it. So generally, there wasn't too much I didn't like in this one, just a couple of little points there. When it comes to the memory test, look, this one I do remember quite well. I mean, I do enjoy those alternate history novels. I think that has a large part to play in it. It wasn't that long ago that I read it. This one, the Hugo for 2018, and I think I read it shortly after, so it would have been 2019 or so. So it's sort of relatively fresh in my mind. There was quite a fair bit of the novel that I recommended. So it did score quite nicely when it comes to the memory test. And I think that even if I was not to read this for another 20 years, I think there are certain aspects to this novel that I will remember with time. So when it comes to recommendations, I highly recommend this one. I thoroughly enjoyed reading this one from cover to cover. So I highly recommend it to all you alternate history people, the people that like those novels with the what if scenario. And I think this is a classic example of the genre and a very well written novel to boot. So when it comes to other alternate history novels that we've read and covered on the board to date, I can't go past The Man in a High Castle by Philip K. Dick. Now this is a wonderful novel, one of my favorites really. It's just a classic, and this is a post-World War II alternate history novel where the Nazis win the war with a really interesting and typical Philip K. Dick twist to it that I think if you've enjoyed The Calculating Stars, you will enjoy this one, and vice versa. The other one that we've recently read and reviewed on the board, I think just a couple of weeks or months ago, will be The Yiddish Policeman's Union. Now this is also a classic alternate history where the Jewish people are settled now in Alaska, and it's sort of a murder mystery novel. So I think if you like The Yiddish Policeman's Union, I think you also like The Calculating Stars, because the main protagonist there is from a Jewish background. So I think you see the similarities when it comes to the characters, and I think if you liked one or the other, you will enjoy both. The other novel that comes to mind will be Elizabeth Ann Scarborough's The Healer's War. For some reason, this novel came to mind several times as I was reading the book. I think it's largely to do with the main female protagonist, who was a nurse in this novel. But again, it was women's place in a war environment. And I think that, her Elma's history as a World War II pilot took me back to Vietnam and the Healer's War. So I'd say that if you've enjoyed the Healer's War, you would also enjoy The Calculating Stars and vice versa. So we're going to have to make a really interesting decision to see where this one lands on the Sci-Fi Shed ladder. So let me flip the cameras around and see where this one lands tonight. So we're back to the Sci-Fi Shed ladder to rank today's Hugo, Nebula and Locus award-winning novel in Mary Robinette Kowal's The Calculating Stars. And when I apply my full criteria that I've documented down below, and I look at things like the concept, the execution, the plot, the characters, the writing, I just don't think it did enough to warrant its place on the A side of the board. So we're currently taking a look at what's available on the B side. And a good place to start will be The Healer's War by Elizabeth Ann Scarborough, because I sort of mentioned that in my similar novels routine. And I'd have to say that the theme and the execution, the concept and execution in The Calculating Stars, I think is a stronger science fiction theme than what we found in the very light fantasy themes that we found in The Healer's War. So I have no reservation ranking this one above The Healer's War. Another interesting novel to take a look at will be Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher, because that was an interesting fantasy novel. It's a sort of dark fantasy novel, but I think when it comes to the memory test, I think I'm going to definitely give The Calculating Stars the edge over Nettle and Bone as a more memorable novel. And I think again it comes down to my personal preferences for that science fiction theme that I think was a little bit stronger than it was in Nettle and Bone, that fantasy theme. But for me, I also was a little bit disappointed that Nettle and Bone wasn't as dark as I was expecting it to be. So I'm going to give it The Calculating Stars again, just a slight advantage over Nettle and Bone. The other one to take a look at again is one that I mentioned in my similar novels, in The Yiddish Policeman's Union by Marcus Chabon. Because again, we're talking about, a Jewish main protagonist like we have in Elmer in The Calculating Stars and what we found in The Yiddish Policeman's Union. So again, similar novel, alternate history novel, and it's very interesting. This was a murder mystery novel that I thought was brilliant, but I did find it to have some loose ends. And based on that, I'm going to give The Calculating Stars the slight nod over The Yiddish Policeman's Union, because I feel it just had a slightly more enjoyable ending. So there you have it. Now, like I said, I haven't read a whole lot of Mary Robinette Kowal's, but I do have the sequel behind me here that I'm really looking forward to read. But have you read Mary Robinette Kowal's novels? Have you read the sequels? What is your take? What is your favorite novel of hers? I know she's written similar novels and short stories in this Lady Astronaut series. Have you read any of those? Are you a big fan? I'd love to hear from you. I definitely enjoyed The Calculating Stars, my second read this time round, and I'm looking forward to hitting the sequels like I mentioned several times now. Hey, I've been Peter, this has been The Shed, and I hope to see you next time in The Shed.